So I was initially going to do my player grades video, and then when I watched some of the Bulls exit interviews from earlier this morning, I thought I would hold off on the grades until tomorrow, as I wanted to touch on some of these key highlights from these interviews for you guys, as I think some of it is noteworthy and has implications for next season and beyond. Also, a big shout out to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. You can get 20% off plus free shipping on your order at manscaped.com using the referral code BullsCentral. A link to the code is in the description, as it helps me out as well if you need anything from there, so feel free to use my code for a discount, but more on that in a little bit. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Guys, I uploaded a video earlier on my Bulls season grade for the team as a whole, along with the results from the voting in the Discord. We also have voting for each of the individual players as well on the Discord, so if you want to join, please feel free to do so. Link to the Discord is in the description. But anyway, like every season, at its closing, each team hosts exit interviews for the players, normally done in person, but this season, every interview, press conference, etc. has all been done over Zoom, and these interviews give you a bit of a hint or insight into where the players' heads are at, their key takeaways, plans for the offseason, and goals for next season. And now I want to start with Billy Donovan, because I know there have been a lot of Bulls fans who have been critical of his coaching style, his rotations, the way that he's handled this season, myself included to an extent. But for the people who have claimed that Billy Donovan is in the hot seat in terms of his job security, well, I think based on these interviews, both in the things that he said as well as what the players have said, couldn't be further from the truth in terms of where he stands with his job. Now, Billy Donovan did acknowledge that he was disappointed in this season given the fact that they weren't able to make it to the postseason. He did mention that he doesn't think that has anything to do with the trades that were made at the deadline, that ultimately he does think it will help them out in the long term, which I completely agree with. I mean, when you think about it, you look at how things transpired shortly after the trade. It's easy to say that this was a failed trade for the Bulls. However, these guys didn't really get a chance to really run together in full and get to know one another and play together, given Lavine was out for a good portion of that. Guys like Tyson Brown Jr. were also in and out of the lineup. The traveling scheduling didn't allow for enough practice, but like I said in my earlier upload, all of these factors and circumstances aside, it was still a disappointing season for the Bulls, which Billy Donovan acknowledges. Donovan also mentioned that Zach Lavine has been a great player to work with and that they built a really good relationship, and that talent aside, he's an even better person in general, and really appreciated that about him. He did acknowledge that there are things that Zach is going to have to take a deep dive into how he can take another step in leading and figuring out the winning part of the game, which is interesting because I know a lot of people feel that, Zach is already there, but rather that, him looking inward, the Bulls need to find some help for him. Well, he got additional help at the deadline, and the Bulls still weren't able to win consistently. Now, that's not on Zach specifically anyway, but he is the leader of this team. So for Billy Donovan to say that he needs to look a little more inwardly in figuring out that winning part, really to take the next step, is a valid point. I mean, that's what separates Lavine from a star to being a superstar. The good thing is that Lavine and Vucevic started off going 3-7 after the trade, but then ultimately finished 7-8 for their final game. So there was progress, and you hope as Bulls fans that you continue to see that progress going into next season. I think the other thing to keep in mind, which Casey Johnson, the Bulls beat writer, called out, was the fact that Lavine, over his entire career, has never played 2 consecutive full seasons for the same coach. And that stability for him going into next season will be great for his overall development. Billy Donovan also praised Thaddeus Young and the leadership that he had brought to the team in the locker room and on the court, and just his overall adaptability and desire to compete night in and night out. And yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Thad was amazing this season compared to what we saw last year. Really, until the trade was made for Vucevic, you could argue that Thaddeus was the Bulls' second best player for everything that he was able to do on the court. And then also Billy Donovan talked about Patrick Williams and what his plans are to do in connecting with him over the summer and making sure that he's continuing to learn and develop after a very unique season in which, he didn't have a full off season, no summer league, a shortened training camp going into his first year in the NBA. Now Vucevic, he also had some key takeaways in his interview, and Casey Johnson also highlighted in some of his tweets. Vuce did reiterate that he said this before, this trade wasn't made for this year. It was made for the future of this franchise. As you can see from the below quote there, he did mention that everything has been positive within the organization, which is great to hear considering that Often that just has not been the case with the Bulls organization in the past. And he also acknowledged that the lack of practice time did hurt their overall play, which makes sense. I don't think anybody was surprised by that. Vucevic also did mention that Lavine is all about winning and wants to do that here, which is great to hear, since I know some fans are speculating on whether Lavine does in fact want to stay with the Bulls and assessing his options in the final year of his contract. Garrett Temple, he was pretty adamant that the Bulls did not reach their full potential, and that there was no question the organization is heading in the right direction. He also mentioned that he was pleasantly surprised by the organization in beginning to set this new culture for the franchise. He also did add that he hopes to be back next season. The other piece that Temple mentioned that I was really surprised by was the fact that he said that Billy Donovan's pre- and post-game talks were some of the best that he had heard in terms of preparing players and holding them accountable. That's pretty big praise for someone like Temple, who has been in the league for such a long time and as a journeyman has played for multiple coaches throughout his career. I don't think he would just come out and say that simply to be nice. And then of course Lavine, I think we all want to know as we go into the offseason and next season as this free agency looms is whether he wants to be in Chicago. And yet again, as he stated before, I love it here in Chicago and that he's very excited for the future. But what Lavine did mention though, which isn't a surprise, but it goes against some of the recent reports that Zach is looking to take a discount to play for the Bulls if they're able to bring in more pieces. He did say, as for his future contract, it's a business at the end of the day. I definitely want what I deserve. And that's what I had my doubts about, and Lavine actually wanting to take less than the max when these reports came out. Obviously, he didn't say that specifically, but he wants to get his money. He sees what some of the other guys are making in the league at his level of play, and he's going to expect that. Zach did have very positive things to say about Billy Donovan and that he's a true leader, and agreed that they have a strong relationship and bond. He also mentioned that he does need to look inward and getting better as a leader on the defensive end. Patrick Williams was also interviewed and said he will play in next year's summer league since they didn't have one last year. I do think that will be really great for him and give him some more run time with other young players, as he didn't have the experience coming into the league like most rookies do. Thaddeus Young, our guy Thad, he mentioned the management didn't give him any indication on whether or not he would be back next season, given his contract is only partially guaranteed, which that's not surprising. They're not going to share that type of information with players or lead them to believe one direction or the other. But Thad did say that he is fully committed to the Bulls and that talks with the organization have been very positive. Now, the other person I want to talk about is Arturas Karnisovas, because he had a lot to say for a guy that we don't get to see interviewed very often. Like Billy Donovan, he also acknowledged that he was disappointed with the season and not making it to the playoffs for the players and the fans, and cited a lot of bad losses and close game losses that were really the result of that. What was interesting was that he highlighted 3 constant problems throughout the season that needed to be addressed: turnovers, fouling, and getting to the line. Now, I've talked about the Bulls and their turnovers ad nauseum on this channel, right? But I found it interesting that Arturas chose to highlight fouling and getting to the line as the other key problems. He didn't mention defense or inconsistent shooting, but fouling and getting to the line, which I don't disagree with, as it seemed like, the Bulls rarely got to the line throughout the year. However, I think, some of that is on the refs, but also some of it is on the players and their lack of aggression and getting to the basket and, more often settling for outside shots. But I would have thought that he would highlight more problem areas than just fouling and getting to the line. I think there were a lot more issues, systemic issues with the team outside of just those areas. And then this comment here is what we want to see if we're Bulls fans. I see tremendous room for growth and improvement. We won't settle for mediocrity here. We will continue to be aggressive in trying to improve this roster. Yes, this is what I want to see after all of these years under Gar Pax, who are always perfectly fine with mediocrity, and in a perpetual state of rebuilding. We now have a front office who is not going to settle for anything but the best and will be aggressive in order to get there, which is of course We already saw that at the deadline, but knowing that they're going to continue to plan that path moving forward is great to hear. Now, the other thing I was surprised by was the fact that Arturas actually touched a bit on Lauri Markkanen and how he is an important part of this team and that he's looking forward to talking to his representation. Now, you can say, well, that's just what Arturas has to say. He's just being cordial. But I feel like Arturas isn't the type of guy to do that. He would be more vague in saying that they're going to look at their options and talk to his agent. The fact that he said Lauri is an important part of the team, I was a little surprised by. I do still think Lauri has potential as a player, but just not sure that he fits this Bulls roster anymore. I'll go through this a little more quickly as I know the video is dragging on a bit, but Arturas did also mention that he was truly blessed to work with Billy Donovan and his staff, and overall he was really pleased with the job that they did. He also addressed the topic of upgrading at the point guard position and said, what is a point guard these days? All point guards have to score. Coby fought for the starting job and showed some improvement. I'm expecting him to show up and be better next season. That was a surprise to me, as it was kind of assumed that Arturas was looking to upgrade at the point guard position. Not saying that he still isn't wanting to do that, and he very well could, but the fact that he basically said, a point guard in this day in a positionless form of basketball isn't that important. And the fact that Coby is a scorer, well, he's saying point guards have to score. So I like that he defended Coby and essentially implied that he is in their future plans and expect him to continue to grow. He also did talk about Zach Lavine briefly, looking forward to talking about his future and even address that, their second round pick, Simonovic, is in their plans as well. I know the last two, were a bit brief and there's a lot more to be taken away from these exit interviews, but feel free to check them out if you want the full interviews, if you haven't already. I think, the key takeaways from all of this is, well, really everyone inside the organization, the players, the coaching staff, the front office, they're all disappointed in the outcome of the season. That's not a surprise. Same for the fans. But they all have high hopes for next season. But more importantly, the theme across all of these interviews was really the positivity that was spoken about the new organization and the changing culture of the franchise, which is so key because the Bulls have been on the opposite end of this for so many years now, dating all the way back to the 90s dynasty, in a toxic culture, unhappy players, backstabbing politics, closed lines of communications with players and executives. That is all changing and is great to see if you're a Bulls fan, despite the disappointing season that we had. Also, the other common theme is, Billy Donovan isn't going anywhere. The players like him. The front office likes him. I know as fans, we question his moves and his overall ability to motivate the guys, but the fact of the matter is he is well-liked and well-respected. And the Bulls haven't had a coach like that really since Tibbs. And guys, it was just one season under Billy Donovan. They're not just going to fire him after 1 year. It's not happening. Anyway, let me know what stood out to you guys in these exit interviews and the key takeaways that you took away from it that I might have missed, as I'm sure there was a lot that I did miss. Make sure that you guys check out manscaped.com and use my referral code for 20% off your order. Be sure to subscribe, as I'm doing a season-ending giveaway for all of my subscribers for a signed Joakim Noah magazine. I'll be doing the drawing on Wednesday morning. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.